Well, today has turned out to be a rather big news day, hasn't it? Not only has Trials been announced, but we've just had a massive director's cut from Luke Smith. Now, these are kind of like a massive essay blog type affair from him when he talks about the game itself, where he wants it to go, where they all want it to go, and the changes that they're going to be making. And there's some pretty big changes coming, really. Changes to the seasonal model and how they're going to implement it, how they're going to treat their core activities, strikes, things like that. Big changes coming to legendary weapons, and also some pretty big imminent changes coming in Season 10, which is just around the corner. So let's dive in and have a look. When I came back from the holiday this year, something about Destiny felt off to me. Season 9 is, to me, the best winter season we've done in Destiny 2, but something felt missing, and that missing element is what I think we need to focus on throughout 2020 and into 2021. Then he carried on by saying, last year we started thinking about aspiration and what is missing from Destiny. The gaping, burning, eye-shaped hole is something I'd felt since we set Trials aside earlier in D2. Its return is part of a bigger goal for Destiny moving into 2020 and beyond. We need to refuel aspiration in Destiny 2. And he's absolutely right. That's exactly what's missing from this game at the moment. We do what's demanded of us. Maybe we grind a bit, we get pinnacles, but even the power level is something that we no longer chase. Weapons we no longer chase because we're using the same weapons as we always did. You know, different legendaries and things like that. I do try to switch my weapons up now and again, but I always find myself going back to the old faithfuls. So, you know, this is what they do need to change. What do they do to pin down how we can actually get the juices flowing again, because that's what it comes down to? Well, he carries on by saying, because we aren't spending our development resources and time as well as we could, we're talking about moving away from creating season bespoke private activities, and instead using that time and effort to build themes that aren't just represented by a marquee event that will fade away, but rather to inject these seasonal themes into more of the game. Like we continue to evolve the world's narrative, we could invest more in evolving the world of our public spaces and take further efforts to evolve Destiny 2's core activities. And I think this hits it on the head for me exactly. I love strikes, I love the story missions, I love the patrol spaces, I love wandering around with all these other strangers there, and you can just have funny interactions, or you can all suddenly pool together to do something spontaneously live in the world. That's great, and I'm so pleased to see that they're considering at least using those activities and embellishing them more in order to push the game forward, instead of creating more bespoke single activities, which do end up being pretty much the same thing over again and again. The best activities in Destiny are the ones that are already in it. Luke Smith continues saying, ideally, core activities are convergence points for player motivation, e.g., I want to maximize XP, chase awesome items, and generate economy that I can use to further my goals. Yes, I know no one talks this way. That's right, no one does talk this way. We all talk and swear and shout and fart and things. Right now, our seasonal activities, like the Sundial, compete with the core activities. They have new rewards and award players powerful gear, but they don't provide a bunch of XP. Core activities provide a bunch of XP, but we all feel the pain of, how many seasons will I get the Titan rain-catching shoulder pads from the Drifter? What this competition means is that it can be really hard to line up a night of optimizing in Destiny because you're being pulled in different directions by our design. So what they've inadvertently done is given us so many things to do, and they're all in competition with one another, that you never really know which way to turn, which way to go. So how are they planning on changing this? Well, he carries on by saying that, so what could investing more in core activities look like? Well, it could mean more awards being distributed into these activities, or it could mean taking a theme for a season and using it to galvanise strikes. Great idea, I miss strikes so much. If we're going to ask players to engage with these activities, we have an opportunity to leverage rewards throughout the season. Imagine the armor sets or sundial weapons being woven into core activities reward pools, or imagine experiencing like pursuing roles for sweet weapons that could only be found in a given playlist as an end of the match reward, like a Crucible. I've never been able to pronounce that gun, I haven't got a bloody clue how to, but what he's saying is wonderful. Nothing beats an actual weapon going badoosh on the screen straight away after you've completed an activity. Bang! There's your reward. Here it is. Woo! Isn't it marvellous? So this is great stuff. He carries on. We also think we could invest more of our development time in our quest lines. Right now, things like Sundial consume team resources and then they fade away, which is exactly what I was just saying, and loads of people are saying it all over Reddit and stuff. Imagine instead that seasonal quest lines like Save a Legend didn't go away in the following season, but instead existed until the next expansion releases. That way, as players drift in and out of the game, there's a bunch of content building up for them to play when they return. Great idea, really good idea, because then we get to keep all our season pass stuff for the whole year, and then typically a big expansion and a huge update to the story releases autumn time, beginning of October as it was last year, and then after that the story changes everything and that content is no longer relevant. Hello email, and then we get all the new stuff. The next bit I'm cherry picking is, he says, just as we continue to evolve the narrative of our world, we can continue to invest in evolving the world of open world public spaces. In case you're unfamiliar, these are the spaces where you seamlessly see other players appear. We've built a world where players can encounter others, but we haven't made a world with fights challenging enough where you feel like other players matter. And this is the most exciting thing about it all, that the patrol areas, the massive tracts of land, the planets where you can just wander around doing lots of stuff, are all practically just empty in a lot of ways. I don't mean physically empty, I mean bereft of things to do, and they could be the trigger for everything. They could really be the crowning achievement of Destiny, its central thing, the place where you spend the most time is actually the most important place to be, because stuff happens there, story happens there, big events happens there, and I know public events everyone piles in when they happen, but there's like a flag going and as you see it starting, there was something really cool about when you didn't have the flag there and the skies just darkened and you thought, what the bloody hell's going on here? And then an event happened. It would be great if story beats were introduced like that out in the wild. That's the stuff everybody really likes, I think. Okay, are you still with me? The next thing I'm going to pick up on and have a little look through and read to you is what they say, particularly what he says rather, about legendary weapons. Now, in Destiny 2, he says, with Infusion, it's like having every card you own in Magic available and playable in all formats forever. It passively creates power creep, which is an ongoing Destiny problem, which also means our teams need to spend more and more of their time retesting and supporting old stuff instead of making new stuff. It reduces player desire for new items, which dismantles aspiration like the Shard the Blue post-Crucible match ritual, and it means we ultimately create a ton of gear that doesn't have any value beyond ticking the box on the I got it checklist. That isn't value. It's actually the opposite of value, because it's work that we could be putting into making new stuff or improving old stuff. He says we've made a lot of Magic cards and we want you to keep the ones that you love in your collection, as opposed to taking them and throwing them all away and having the tower get destroyed again. We don't want that. We don't want the tower destroyed again, really, do we? No. And a bunch of those Magic cards could be playable around the world while free roaming or in PvP formats. But where power matters or aspirational activities are involved, there's that word again, we're going to make some changes to legendary weapons. In the world we're imagining, we'll have space at the top end to create powerful legendary weapons. Legendaries that are just better than other items in the classification. We'll be able to do that because the design space for weapons will expand and contract over time. Items will enter the ecosystem, be able to be infused for some number of seasons, and beyond that, their power won't be able to be raised. Our hope is that instead of having to account for weapons viability forever when we create one, it can be easier to let something powerful exist in the ecosystem, and those potent weapons entering the ecosystem mean there's more fun items to pursue. And he starts to round off talking about the legendary weapons by saying changes like this also mean legendary weapons, or their talents, I assume that means perks, that would be shelved could be reissued at a future date. or could be brought back in fun ways by involving our community. The more specific nitty-gritty for this will come a little bit further down the road, but we wanted to get some of the thinking behind it to you sooner rather than later. The simplest version of how it is going to work is legendary weapons will have fixed values for how high they can be infused. Those values will project the weapon's viable in-end-game lifespan, and we think that lifespan is somewhere between 9 and 15 months. So a gun's viable lifespan for its use as a end game tool will be limited between 9 and 15 months, and then after that point the weapon will no longer be infusible up to the future power that's going to be turning up. Now I think they've got to do this in some shape, because it seems to me that they're constantly tuning weapons forever and ever and ever in order to fit in with the new changes as the game evolves, and by doing that they're not being able to allocate those particular team members or programmers or whatever the hell you want to call them into creating new stuff, new weapons. They're constantly trying to manage the old stuff, and it's just swelling up and up and up and becoming completely impractical to manage. So this is a good idea, I reckon. We all do get attached to weapons, but you know, metas come, metas go. Weapons come, weapons go. So there's nothing to really worry about, is there? Meh. And he does briefly mention exotics. We are not applying this idea to exotic weapons at this time. We want to iterate on the legendary ecosystem first, which is basically because it's the biggest and the most used, and I think that's pretty good. Leave exotics alone, let them constantly be relevant. We're coming to the last few bits of his director's cut notes, and he starts talking about how the game is sustainable, how it develops, because you know, when we have an expansion we usually get some big mechanic change to the game. Like for example, it was a big change for the armor and things like that, which actually moved with the expansion. But if we read what he says here, on the technical side I come back to sustainability. As new areas, features and even types are added to Destiny, the problems of maintenance grow accordingly for the team. New changes to the system have to be checked against all content, new and old alike. That introduces risk and a big burden on our teams to maintain that legacy content. In practical terms, it also prevents us from responding to players who have problems as quickly as we would like. Seasons can do some of the heavy lifting here, in the sense of giving players a sense of shared purpose and understanding of what they're working for, but when we ready expansions, it's a chance to make some more fundamental changes to the game world and its systems. We've done significant system changes to all Destiny games every time we've shipped an expansion, and now we're going to be making more changes to the game world as we go forward. So they're going to be looking at being more fluid when it comes to changes in the system. They're not going to be working towards doing it when it's an expansion, they're going to be doing it as they go. So they're going to be pivoting away from the mechanic and method they've been using for years. So this could be really good for us, but we shall have to wait and see. Now, coming to the end of the director's cut, he actually gives us some very specific information which I think you'll find rather interesting. Now, the first one is about faction rallies. He says lots of folks have been wondering if faction rallies will return. We have no plans, dun dun dun, to bring back faction rallies. The reward gear hasn't been used that much, our character cast is growing too large, and crucially, they didn't drive a bunch of engagement within the game. That said, there's some sweet looks in that gear, and we're moving the faction rally armor to the legendary engram reward pools in Season 10, alongside a few popular faction weapons. That's exciting, because I've got to be honest with you, faction rallies were fine in Destiny 1, I thought, when they played constantly in the background. Well, they weren't even faction rallies, they were just factions, they were another source of rewards. But in D2, I just found them a bit dull, really, just constantly doing lost sectors from what I can remember. That was ages ago. So I think, you know, they're keeping the cool aspects of it, which is some of the gear and the designs, and they're getting rid of the more boring aspects of it. I'm sure they can reuse the characters. It'd be great to see them being killed in some amusing manner in a massive war with the darkness. The next news squirt is about bright engrams. For Season 10, we're doing away with bright engrams as purchasable items. We want players to know what something costs before they buy it. Bright engrams don't live up to that principle, so we will no longer be selling them in the Eververse store, though they will still appear on the free track of the Season Pass. So, not much to say about that really. Goodbye bright engrams, you won't be missed. Okay, moving on to the next bit of juicy goss. something of interest to all New Light players, well not now, but the new ones. Our goals for New Light last year were about bringing new players into the universe and getting them to the core activities as quickly as we could. We dramatically underestimated how many new Guardians would wake up on the Cosmodrome. We're going to improve the New Light entry this fall and flesh the starting experience in Destiny out. Now, I haven't done that myself because obviously I've been playing it for ages, but I have noticed there's been loads of comments, Twitter, Reddit, things like that, where people are just utterly baffled as what happens. They feel like they're just dumped into this huge game with so many things to do that the choices are overwhelming and there's no guidance or hand-holding at the beginning, which is really important for the initial experience, because if you don't feel like the game cares about you, then you're not going to want to play it, so this is a really good thing, I think. More Season 10 news about the Quest tab. He says the number of quests you have at any given time can sure feel daunting, especially for procrastinators. Hands up, guilty. Yes, I procrastinate all the time. So we're adding a new feature to the Quest tab, categorization. All quests are automatically assigned a category, and this buckets them into a specific area with the Quest tab. Buckets. For example, exotic quests get their own category as well as a seasonal quests. The seasonal quest category is helpful in that it contains all of the quests that expire at the end of the season. There are several categories, including one for older releases, e.g. Forsaken quests. This should help players focus on the quests that are new and most relevant versus older content that maybe isn't as high priority as it used to be. This is also a very welcome change because at the moment it's like somebody's written all the quests down on a little bit of paper, chucked them in a bag and then shaken it up, and you close your eyes and put your hand in and pull out the one you want to do. What I'm talking about is the fact that you can't really bloody see very much. So good, well done, excellent. So what do you think about what he said about the way they're going to go? Are you pleased? Are you excited? Are you cheesed off that your legendaries are now going to have a shelf life? What do you think about the adjustments they're going to be making to the seasonal model? I didn't really like the seasonal model that much because I found that you ended up having less kind of story stuff and content, which in fairness they did say that's exactly what was going to happen, but I do think that's subtracted from the game. Do you think that you'd pay more for a season if it had more in it? Because at the end of the day, $10 isn't much. So, you know, back when we had the 3 expansions throughout the year, I know they found that difficult to do, but do you prefer going back to that model? Anyway, let me know what you think of the video. It's a bit different to what I do, but you know what? The game's changing. I love the game and I really want to talk about it a bit more. So if you've got anything that you want to say, please let me know in the comments. And hopefully, I will see you again very soon. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, up there for thinking, down there for dancing. Time Sausages Gaming Channel.